Happy Friday! Welcome back to Drinking by Myself. My name is Emma and I'm here to talk about books that I didn't give 5 stars to, but in retrospect, I realised that I should have. And annoyingly, I actually planned this video a while ago and I should have filmed it because I've just had to leave my bookshelves behind, other than my trolley, which I did insist on taking with me. And so I don't have any of the books I'm about to talk about physically with me, even though they're all books that I own and cherish. So I should have filmed it before. But oh well, you're just going to have to make do with pictures of the books on the screen. So the thing about rating books is I feel like obviously it's so subjective, but also I change my mind on my own rating system all the time, so it's kind of completely meaningless. And I actually said, when I did my video this year on the best books that I read in 2019, I talked about how quite a few of them were ones that I'd given 4 stars to, and yet they still made it into like my favourite books of the year over some books that I gave 5 stars. Because I use the 5-star button on Goodreads in a really like random sporadic way, to be honest. It's actually really hard to tell when you first finish a book what your overall feeling about that book is going to be forever. Sometimes a book can be absolutely brilliant, but if it doesn't have like a super strong ending, you finish it feeling like it was a 4-star. But then those are the books that you end up thinking about for ages afterwards. Or it doesn't even have to be that it didn't have a strong ending. A lot of the books on this list, it's not that they didn't have strong endings. It was just, I don't know, my snap judgment was that I loved this book, but didn't think it was going to be like an absolute favourite, one that I would want to reread. But all of the books in this video are books that I've just never stopped thinking about. So the rating system is all skewed. But anyway, here are books that I should have given 5 stars to because I think about them all the time. So the first on my list is Anything You Do Say by Gillian McAllister. And this is the second, I think, of her books that I read. And I think about it like at least once a week. It's kind of Sliding Doors, if Sliding Doors was a thriller. And it opens with a woman. It's such a strong opening. It's this woman walking home from a club late at night and she starts feeling like she's being followed. And it's such a tense scene and so relatable to so many of us who've done that. And like the fear that you genuinely feel while reading it of her kind of deliberately changing directions and hearing the footsteps behind her also change. It's terrifying. And this is not a spoiler, it's just a very dramatic opening. This first chapter takes us up to the point where the man following her gets closer and closer until she pushes him to get away from her, and he is really badly injured. So then the book divides. From then on, every chapter switches based on the decision she makes next, which is whether to call the police and wait with this man or to run away. And we see these two such different paths that her life goes down, both of them equally terrifying. Both of them have like really dramatic consequences. I can't remember at all why I gave this book a 4-star, not a 5-star. I think about it all the time. I talk about it all the time. It's like one of my favourite books. It's so good. And Gillian McAllister, by the way, is incredible. I've read all of her books. I just read her 5th book, How to Disappear, and that was also a 5-star. So good. She's just like genuinely getting better and better with every book of hers I read. Now my next one is also a thriller. And interestingly, I wanted to talk about the fact that a lot of the books on this are thrillers. Not all of them. So if you don't like thrillers, keep watching. I've got a mix. But it's actually so rare for me to give a thriller 5 stars. That's possibly why I didn't give Anything You Do Say a 5-star either. And I don't know why it is, because I love thrillers. It's like my favourite genre. I don't know if it's almost like an internal, like unconscious snobbery towards the fact that these are thrillers. These are like fun, page-turning, fast-paced books. And so I don't consider them, I don't like compare them to the kind of 5-star literary reads that I sometimes would reserve my 5 stars for. But that's so silly because these are all amazingly written books. They're books that stick with you. So I don't know if that's it, but maybe I need to like address my unconscious bias against giving thrillers 5 stars. Who knows? But anyway, the next book I wanted to talk about is I Let You Go by Clare Mackintosh. Now this is a book that I read like 3 years ago. It's hard to talk about because it's got such a good twist that I don't want to accidentally say anything. Right, there's quite a lot of noise suddenly coming through from outside, so hopefully that isn't disturbing you too much. This one is really hard to talk about because it's got such a good twist that I don't want to accidentally say something that ruins that. But what can I say about it? I think I'll just say that. I think just the less you know about this one, the better. It's about a woman running away from this tragedy that we see right at the beginning what happens. But there is a twist midway through the book that just turns everything on its head. I at that point had never read anything like that before. And it kind of, it's like, it doesn't even really fit into the thriller genre almost. Like the first half of that book is something totally different. The first half is quite a slow-moving, sad book, and then the second half is this really, really fast-paced, action-packed thriller. So it's fantastic. Clare Mackintosh is great. That's so loud. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do about that. That one definitely was the ending that made me give this one a 4-star instead. I'm not going to go into it because it's like way too many spoilers to reveal, but there was just something in the ending. There was like one too many little bits that made everything kind of fall into place a bit too neatly, and I didn't like that, and so I gave it a 4-star. My snap reaction after finishing it was like, oh, I didn't really like that ending, so I gave it a 4-star instead of a 5-star. But I don't think you should rate a book based solely on the ending. It was a brilliant book. The experience of reading it was so intense, and it stuck with me. 3 years later, I think about that twist all the time, and again, like, talk about it all the time. So it should have been a 5-star book. Next, a book that was in my best books of 2019 video is The Farm by Joanne Ramos. So this was it's kind of a dystopian, but it's almost entirely set in our real world. But it's about this centre, Golden Oaks or something, that hosts surrogates. So very rich clients can pay for surrogates who then live at this centre and are very, very well looked after, but with very strict rules. So it's all about the kind of hyper-commodification of women's bodies. And the women who are the surrogates are mostly very poor women compared to their very rich clients. A lot of them are immigrants and don't have that many other options for work. So we kind of see them become more and more helpless and more dependent on this centre. And we have a few different perspectives of the women that the story is told from. One of them being the woman who runs the centre. And from her perspective, like, she really feels like she's doing this good thing, bringing the chance to have children to women who can't, which that is a great thing. But it's like she doesn't see the problems in her system that she set up, the way that she is exploiting the women whose bodies are being used for these children. And even just like the commodification of the babies themselves. Like, the whole thing is so creepy, but it's such a good book because it's just one step beyond where we currently are. It's not like a massive dystopian like The Handmaid's Tale, much as we are getting closer and closer to The Handmaid's Tale territory. It's so recognisable and so familiar, and kind of just, it could happen any minute now, but it was really creepy and really interesting. Like, sparked so many conversations. I feel like this would be such a good book club book if you're looking for a book club book. Then I've got Stoner by John Williams. So that's a very different type of book, and this was one that was huge a few years ago. It's an old book that was suddenly rediscovered, and it's really sad. It's this really slow moving sad book that I guess I gave it 4 stars, maybe because it was a bit slow moving for me, but it stuck with me through the years. So this is about a man called something Stoner. I can't remember his first name, but it's called Stoner because his surname is Stoner, not because he is a stoner. Right at the beginning, we basically hear his obituary, and we find out that when he dies, he has never really achieved anything, and he doesn't have a close family. He doesn't really have people who mourn him. It's this pretty kind of bleak picture of this man who didn't ever really amount to much. Then we go back and we meet him as an 18-year-old setting off to university, and we follow the most hopeful, ambitious young man setting off to university. So it's just tragic watching all these things he's aiming for, and us the whole time knowing that that's not going to happen, and everything just keeps going wrong for him. Oh my goodness, that book broke my heart into a million pieces. But it is a really beautiful, lovely book as well. It's a bit like A Little Life. I mean, it's not that tragedy, that kind of stuff doesn't happen to him, but in that both of those books, what they have in common is that they're these desperately sad books, but hopeful in the way that they show, even in these sad and seemingly small lives, it is still a life. There is so much value in that life, even with not achieving the things that they set out to achieve, the relationships that they do make and the experiences that they do have, that is a life, and that we all therefore have that experience, we all therefore have that chance to have that life, even if it wasn't the one that we kind of set out to have. That was such a rambly sentence, but that's where I get the hope from really bleak books. I love reading really bleak books and then finding them hopeful in that way. And talking of bleak books, another book on this list is Road Ends by Mary Lawson, which is a book about a Canadian girl who lives in this family with loads of kids. They're all boys, and her mother is mentally unwell and very distant, and her father is also very distant. I think he's just really struggling with the family, very overwhelmed. And this girl basically is just in charge of keeping the family together. But I don't remember how old she is, but 18, 19 I think, she decides to set off to London to have this journey for herself. And we follow her going away and getting away from her family and trying to get a job and start a new life for herself in London. And once again, it is just like bleak things happening one after the other. But at the same time, we're kind of watching what's happening to her family back home and how they're falling apart without her. And I know the timelines are slightly off. I can't quite remember which way round. We're kind of going back and forth in time a little bit, but we know eventually these timelines will sync together. And it's whether or not she will actually, well, the title, Road Ends, like whether she will get the chance to go on and make a new life for herself without her family, or whether she is just going to be trapped with them. Another fantastic book. I can't remember why I gave it 4 stars, because I think about it all the time. So that was just 5 books that I didn't give 5 stars, but probably should have. But I'd love to know, do you guys get this? Like where you rate a book lower and then you look back later and find that it was actually a 5 stars? Because I get it the other way around as well. Sometimes I will give a book 5 stars, and then when I look back on it, even like 2 months later, I'll be like, I don't remember that book. I don't remember what happened in it or why I loved it so much. So it's really, really hard to predict which books are going to stick with you. Also, I'd love to know whether you agree that a book sticking with you like that is a mark of it being a 5-star book. Like, what does a 5-star book even mean to you? Who knows? This is a conversation that can go on for hours, so I'm going to stop and tell you to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button below for new videos twice every week. See you next time.